You maxed your Roth, you bought the dip, you sat tight through the crash. So why are you still broke? Imagine your portfolio like a leaky bucket. You fill it with stocks, drip feed contributions, and expect it to brim over time. But by the time inflation and taxes leak out, you barely have anything left. You're not alone.
Americans are carrying a lot of debt, adding to the stress of inflation.
Living paycheck to paycheck? If so, you have plenty of company.
More than 34% of American workers report living paycheck to paycheck, with little to no money left over after expenses. Let's be brutally honest. For a generation promised financial freedom through index funds and dollar-cost averaging,
well, Americans are historically bad savers. Right now, we're saving about 5%. And historically, when we look at the last 50 years, it's only been about 8%.
the results have felt more like slow-motion disappointment. You filled your portfolio like a responsible adult, month after month, watching those little green lines go up. So while you were drip-feeding your hard-earned money into this supposedly airtight financial plan, the bottom was quietly draining. And by the time you're ready to use that money, whether for a down payment, an emergency, or actual retirement, it's not the overflowing reservoir you were promised. It's barely a puddle. Truthfully, you can't even splash around in it.
A lot of my money that I make goes back into my rent.
8 million Americans are making more than $100,000 a year and are still living paycheck to paycheck.
All over the internet, like Reddit and TikTok, millions are waking up to the same reality. I've been investing for years and I'm still paycheck to paycheck? And maybe, just maybe, it's because you weren't actually investing. You were participating in a game, one built for someone else, with rules they wrote and loopholes they knew. We've all heard that a diversified portfolio of S&P 500 ETFs returns roughly 7% after fees, a number drilled into us by countless advisors and personal finance blogs. If anything, you've heard it 1,000 times. Just shove your money into an S&P 500 ETF, forget it for 40 years, and retire rich.
Consistently buy an S&P 500 low-cost index fund.
10% nominal returns, they said, after inflation. 6 to 7% real. After taxes? Still a comfy 5%, right? Not quite. Just a little fact-checking will show you that since 1957, the S&P 500 has delivered around 10.4% nominal annually, but only about 6.5% after inflation. Then comes Uncle Sam, 15 to 20% in long-term capital gains, plus up to 3.8% in net investment income tax, shrinking that to a 2 to 3% real annual return. Let's translate. That 7% you banked on? Voila, it's down to 2%. It's like expecting filet mignon and getting lukewarm tofu. Calling that 2% net return retirement prep is like calling a single scoop of vanilla a gourmet meal. Sure, it's somewhere on the buffet tray, but it's nothing you'd put on your Instagram story. So don't forget, dear middle-class investors, you've been told to stay the course. But the course is a kids and water menu unless you bring your own sauces in the form of asset ownership, tax strategy, or even business income. Let's just say you're magicking away $300 a month for 40 years. At 10% nominal, you get around $1.4 million. But after inflation and taxes, the situation looks more like $350,000 in real dollars. Barely enough to rent a condo for 10 years in New York City.
Too many people are in debt, and as they approach that retirement age, they're not going to be ready to support themselves and be able to retire.
Basically, deposits feel heroic, but withdrawals feel downright pathetic. At this point, that freedom nest egg looks more like half a breakfast. If realizing your 7% returns are more like a soggy 2% has you mildly enraged, hit like. If you're pissed and overplaying someone else's game, hit subscribe even harder. And drop a comment. Seriously. We want to know, what financial rule are you officially calling BS on? Oh, and share this with your group chat. You know the one. Long before you ever fired up your Robinhood app, index funds were dreamt up by card-carrying bean counters at pension funds and endowments, which are, by the way, institutions swimming in billions and sinking in time, not people with student loans, or the renters juggling family chores. These financial leviathans needed low-cost, hands-off investment vehicles they could park for 30 to 40 years without worrying about paying rent or student loans. Meanwhile, here you are.
As higher prices across the board force Americans to use credit cards.
Juggling credit card debt, rent, and that suspiciously expensive oat milk latte habit, being handed the exact same tool. It's like giving someone training wheels for a Harley-Davidson and saying, "You're good to go, pal." When you invest in something like VTI, you don't actually own the company. you own a microscopic sliver of it. Imagine being told you own a piece of Apple when the reality is you're holding about 0.000001% of it and still paying full price. You get no dividend checks, no say in how the board runs things, and certainly no tax deductions beyond the bland promise of portfolio growth. It's like ordering a shirt and getting a picture of a button with a thread sample. Contrast this with the institutions. They own the buildings, the revenue streams, the depreciation write-offs, and the leverage tools. They can borrow cheaply, write down valuables for tax purposes, and shuffle assets to minimize taxable gains.
More and more millionaires and investors are moving into the city. It's putting a real squeeze on the middle class who are having to leave.
You, on the other hand, are stuck with the mantra, stay the course, like a doomed sailor in neutral gear, while they're busy drafting new rules mid-game that let them skip ahead 5 moves. To really drive home the point, you have to pay attention to the numbers. The S&P 500 has returned about 9.8% annually since 1926. And yes, that's nominal before inflation, but real returns are closer to 6%. And the average of 401k? Not exactly freedom money. It ends up around $134,000 as of last year, with the median account even lower at about $35,000. Now, compare that to Fidelity's recommended targets. 1 year's salary saved by age 30, 3 times by 40, and 6 by 50. Of course, most people fall short of that in the end.
A new survey found most U.S. workers are struggling to make ends meet. Eyewitness News consumer reporter Susan Campbell joins us now with the details.
Americans say they're feeling the pressure financially.
The bottom line is pretty much that you've been playing a game rigged for those with vaults. You were handed a toy boat, told to race across the ocean, and then watch the super yachts glide by. It's time to change things up a little. Now. Build assets that pay you, write off taxes that burn through your funds, and own the tools that help build wealth. All of this needs to be done for you to stop playing someone else's game with their rules. They say the S&P 500 returns about 7% a year on average, but that number only applies before inflation hijacks half of it and Uncle Sam bails it out of the rest. According to historical data, U.S. inflation has averaged roughly 2.9% annually since 1926. So your dazzling 7% whittles down to about 4.1% real. Still feeling good? Not yet, because long-term capital gains are taxed at 0%, 15%, or 20%, and high earners get slapped with an extra 3.8% net investment income tax. Once those bite the dust, your annual gain drops down to roughly 2 to 3%, assuming you're lucky or unlucky enough to fall into the 15% bracket. Turn the calculator upside down. 7% nominal will become around 3% real, leading to roughly 2% after taxes. And there you have it. You've barely outpaced a high-yield savings account. If you thought you were outrunning inflation, think again. You're more like a hamster on a wheel, running and running only because the floor keeps rolling. Meanwhile, your rent receipts go ka-chink every month. Social media feeds are full of people confessing, "I've been investing for 10 years and I still can't quit my day job." Or, "My 401k is growing, but so is my rent." You already know those TikTok and Reddit rants aren't scenes from Black Mirror. They're modern parables about grinding through weather building without net gains. So yes, good job on beating a savings account. By a whisker. But that's not a victory by so much as a bit. Honestly, it's a participation trophy in a race already fixed against you by inflation and taxes. What's next is maybe real assets and tax strategies, tools that turn your hamsters into legit racehorses. The ultra-rich don't sit idly in ETFs waiting for compound interest to magically turn cents into fortunes. They're busy playing chess while the rest of us play checkers. First, they use leverage like it's a secret discount code. By borrowing at low interest rates to fund their property purchases, they can increase returns on tiny capital outlays. For instance, one Business Insider feature highlights how putting down just 10% on a property means you capture the full appreciation of the asset on a fraction of your money, while the bank foots the rest of the bill. Next, they sink money into cash-flowing businesses. They're real companies that spit out profits year after year and aren't even side hustles. Actually, they're income machines that they can deduct expenses from and write off losses against other income. This is totally different from middle-class investors who are always waiting for a spike in their portfolio balance. In truth, the wealthy are collecting checks every month. Then it goes without saying, there's real estate, which offers built-in tax advantages that feel like finding a cheat sheet hidden in the IRS code. Any depreciation lets them deduct an imaginary expense while the property actually appreciates. Moreover, they defer capital gains taxes with 1031 exchanges and deduct mortgage interest, all while property values rise. Actually, according to multiple sources, around 90% of US millionaires achieved their wealth through real estate investing. If anything, the median homeowner's equity, making up about 43% of net worth, is a stark contrast to the relentless rent payments many of us make. You can tell by now that it's like running a marathon with a jetpack. This is while many middle-class investors are jogging in flip-flops, clutching index funds and hoping to cross the finish line, even while they can't even see it in their delusions. The secret to this is, as we mentioned, leverage and tax strategy, the tools that turn a game of slow grinding into a high-speed race. Let's talk about Trump's gleaming legislative infomercial, the One Big Beautiful Bill.
Marathon series of votes on President Trump's so-called One Big Beautiful Bill.
Ostensibly aimed at middle-income earners, it's more like a fireworks show for the ultra-wealthy. The bill permanently extends the 20% Section 191A pass-through deduction for LLCs and S corporations. And that primarily benefits business owners and the top 1%. In fact, it even expands its income phase-in thresholds, letting more high earners write off more of their business income. In the meantime, the standard deduction doubles again, $15,750 for singles and $31,500 for joint filers. Great help, that is, because all that move saves you is maybe a few $100s while ballooning the federal deficit by an estimated $3 to $4 trillion over the next decade. Neat, isn't it? There are new goodies for the middle class, too. There's a $6,000 senior bonus deduction, deductions for overtime pay, tips, and U.S.-assembled car loan interest through 2028. To be honest, though, these feel a lot like dented pennies tossed to the crowd while the billionaires walk away carrying the vault. In fact, around 45% of the tax benefits flow to the top 5% of earners. And well, you already know that Medicaid and food assistance took big hits. That is, Medicaid funds went down, and millions of Americans may lose healthcare coverage. Just your average Tuesday. In short, the OBBB is a classic bait and switch, attractive middle-class perks that distract you from the fact that it's really a vault-opening ceremony for the wealthy, paid for by cuts to social safety nets. The fine print we need to catch on to is that it reads like a user manual for the rich. Standard middle-class investors, not so much. You're not dumb. You've just been playing by rules written for someone else's game. The truth is, real wealth doesn't come from waiting. It comes from owning the source. Real estate, businesses, and income that puts you in control. It's time to change your strategies, stop passive investing, and start building assets that work for you. If this made you rethink your just invest and pray strategy, do yourself a favor. Subscribe. We're done playing the slow game. And if you've got thoughts, rants, or a 401k horror story, the comments are open. Let it rip. Oh, and share this with someone who still thinks index funds are a personality. Till the next one, this has been Money Digest.